All right, welcome to today's webinar, everyone. My name is Kira Zeidelman. I'm a technical manager at NARUC Center for Partnerships and Innovation, and I support the Nuclear Energy Partnership between the U.S. Department of Energy and NARUC. And as we get started, I'd like to thank the Department of Energy for supporting this partnership. And now I'd like to pass things off to Commissioner Tim Echols of the Georgia Public Service Commission. He is a co-chair of the Nuclear Energy Partnership, along with Commissioner Tony O'Donnell from Maryland. So Commissioner Echols, please take it away.
Hey, thanks everyone. Coming to you from Dublin, Georgia today. And thank you, Kira, and your staff for the excellent job that you do in supporting us and the technical assistance that you give to us. It means a lot. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining this Department of Energy NARUC Nuclear Energy Partnership for today's webinar on nuclear provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act. This has been getting a lot of press, a lot of interest out there, so thank you for joining us. The partnership that we have provides opportunities for state public service commissioners like myself and commission staff, we have a lot of those, to better understand barriers and opportunities related to the U.S. nuclear fleet. It also provides education and information for state commissioners, staff, and even legislators, and we have a number of them on today as well, about important issues surrounding the use of nuclear energy technologies, which continue to grow almost monthly, it seems. Today's webinar will feature Benton Arnett. He's coming to us from Washington, from the Nuclear Energy Institute. John Michael Murray, who's down near Disney in Florida, in Kissimmee, Florida, I guess they say, from the Clean Air Task Force, and Jackie Toth from the Good Energy Collective, Good Energy, and she's coming to us from Alexandria, Virginia today. The discussion, of course, is being recorded with the recording and the slides posted to the NARUC website and emailed to attendees next week, and we hope you'll share it. We thank the DOE Office of Nuclear Energy for their support of NARUC's research and technical assistance on nuclear energy issues. So you can enter questions into the Q&A box. We may or may not get to your questions. We'll do our best. I'll ask the speakers during the Q&A to be briefer. So we'll get through as many as possible following the presentations. And if you'd like to be unmuted to ask a question, just raise your hand using the Zoom device, and our staff will assist you. So let me introduce our first speaker, Benton Arnett. He's the Director of Markets and Policy at the Nuclear Energy Institute. We all know this organization. In this role, he covers issues relating to federal and state energy policy, nuclear energy capital formation, industrial nuclear applications. He has a bachelor's in political science, so we may see him run for office one day, and a master's in public service and administration from Texas A&M, and I guess y'all say howdy down there, don't you? He was a presidential management fellow. He served in White House Office of Management and Budget and the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. And prior to joining NEI, Benton advised senior management at ExxonMobil on issue management strategies. I'll turn it to him, and I'll introduce each speaker before they speak. Thank you, Benton.
Thank you, Commissioner Echols. Really appreciate the warm introduction. So excited to be here today and talk to you about some of the provisions relating to nuclear energy in the Inflation Reduction Act. I want to take just a second beforehand, though, to just remark about kind of the magnitude of what we're seeing here. I think it's very easy to think about one piece of legislation and all the various provisions in there, but if we really take a step back, any one of these provisions, if it had been passed, on its own in its own bill, would still be probably the most significant thing to happen in nuclear energy in the past 20 years or so. And so really a landmark piece of legislation, a lot to digest. We have a short amount of time here today, so I'll be brief in my overview of some of these provisions, and happy to take questions in the Q&A time, and then also always happy to answer questions offline. If anyone has anything, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email, and always happy to connect. So getting started on kind of the actual pieces of legislation, I think it's helpful to take a little bit of a step back from the Inflation Reduction Act and think about a bill that was passed towards the end of last year, which was the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And it'll become important because there's a little bit of interplay between the Civil Nuclear Credit Program, which was passed in that Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and some of what we're seeing now in the Inflation Reduction Act. So just as a reminder for everyone, the IIJA introduced this Civil Nuclear Credit Program. It was a $6 billion program with funds spread out evenly over 5 years, so $1.2 billion per year. And reactors could apply to this program for financial aid. So if they were in a situation where they looked like they may be in a place where they were going to close early for economic reasons, this is a way to keep those reactors operational, make some improvements, and hopefully get those back to an economic status. And so the program worked or the way it was envisioned at least, worked by certifying reactors. Those reactors, if certified, would then receive 4 years of credit subsidy or of credits to support continued applications. The applications for this program are not public, so we don't know all of the applications that they received, but we do know that there's 2 notable ones, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little later. That's at Diablo Canyon and also at Palisades. So that program went into place. Fast forward, almost a year, and we have the Inflation Reduction Act. That also introduced a new provision for the existing fleet, which is the Zero Emission Nuclear Power Production Credit, or 45U. That credit is a $15 per megawatt hour credit for any plant placed into service at or before the time the act was instituted. So that's August 16th, 2022. So the entire existing fleet in the US. That provision did include a reduction amount. The intentions of the authors were really to provide a price floor for nuclear energy. So you don't get the subsidy if power prices get too high. In this case, once revenues from electricity sales were at $25 per megawatt hour, the reduction amount begins. And then if you do some calculations based on that reduction amount, you'll find that when power prices are about $43.75 per megawatt hour, that subsidy goes to zero. And so this subsidy goes into place in 2024. So we have a year before it actually comes into action. And then it will end in 2032. So operating reactors will be eligible for that credit throughout that full time period. But the bill didn't stop there. It also included a new credit for new reactors. So in an interesting approach, the authors took kind of all of the various tax credits that we have currently and said, instead of doing this all as individual technology-specific tax credits, let's actually base the tax credits on what we're trying to do, which is to generate clean energy production. And so they introduced the Clean Electricity Production Credit, which is 45Y. This tax credit, if you were to look up the text, you'll see that it says $15 per megawatt hour. It's a little misleading. That's $15 per megawatt hour in $1992. And that amount is adjusted by inflation every year. And so if you do kind of back of envelope calculation, that credit's actually worth about $30 a megawatt hour today. And I say about 30, obviously it could vary just depending on how inflation does over the next couple of years. So that credit will be available for any qualified facilities placed into service after December 31st of 2024. So when you're in 2025, this really kicks off. If you place your unit into service after 2025 or in 2025, you'll get that credit for a full 10 years. So it's a 10-year credit. And then it has another interesting phase out provision. The credit begins phasing out in 2032 or when emissions are 7% below 2022 levels. And it's actually the later of those two numbers. So there's a chance that we could get a little bit beyond 2032 for the eligibility for this credit. So that's a really big incentive for nuclear, and really does a really great job of leveling the playing field, which is something we've been advocating for a number of years to create that level playing field with other carbon-free generation sources. If you're looking at building a new plant and you think, well, I like the production tax credit, but really wish I could have some of that money up front, there's good news. The bill also envisions an investment tax credit option for that subsidy. So you could use what is called the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credit, or 48E. Very similar requirements to that 45Y credit that I mentioned. The time frame is all the same, the criteria is all the same, but you receive it as an investment tax credit. Anyone who's kind of interested or has some history in how investment tax credits have worked, they've traditionally been this 30% base credit, which is what we see for 48E as well, with an interesting perk. There's two kickers included in the bill for this. There's a 10% kicker if you place that facility in an energy community. And we can talk a little bit more about what that is later, but the short of it is it's communities with retiring coal plants or who received a lot of their employment from energy operations in the past and are being impacted by transition to a net zero future. And then there's also another 10% kicker if you use domestic content in the production of your, or in the construction of your facility. So if you're using American produced steel and concrete and some of these other materials, you can get another 10% bonus. So adding all that together, if you meet all of the criteria, you can actually get a 50% investment tax credit through 48E, which is a very big incentive, I think, for some new builds. And then one other program I just want to highlight real quickly, and then I'll pass it off to the other great panelists here today, but is the bill also did some modifications to the Loan Programs Office. So within that, there's two different programs that it impacts, Section 1703 and Section 1706. Section 1703, they appropriated $40 billion in available loans for that program to administer. And then in 1706, there's $250 billion made available for loans under that program. Nuclear energy is actually eligible for both programs. They're slightly different in kind of what the projects look like and how they are available, but that funding is available for nuclear. One cool thing they did here, though, is they actually appropriated what's called the loan subsidy amount. And so in the past, if you'd go in for a loan from LPO, there was always this issue where LPO had to charge borrowers basically what was called their expected loss on the loan. And that expected loss on a project the size of a nuclear project could be fairly significant, not because it's nuclear, but just because you were talking about a lot of money and small percentages start to add up very quickly. And the kind of borrowers that are usually going in for these loans are usually not well suited to put up a large chunk of money up front. And so this loan subsidy actually reduces the borrowing cost for entities that are interested in taking advantage of these loan guarantees, and really makes them a lot more accessible to organizations. So there's $3.6 billion in loan subsidy appropriated for that 1703 amount, and then another $5 billion appropriated for the 1706. So a lot of financing available through the IRA for new carbon-free generations, and I think we'll see some really great interest in this program moving forward. So very exciting time for nuclear, and I think with that, I'll pass it back to you, Commissioner Echols, and we can go on with the program.
Yeah, I'll ask you to maybe answer Kevin's question in the Q&A, but he's asking about the life of a new nuclear plant. Let's just take an SMR. Is that a 40-year life, 60-year life, 80-year? What is the license on those?
Yeah, so the NRC issues a standard 40-year license when they license a new nuclear plant. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with the actual potential operations of the plant. As we know, the existing fleet has gone out, very safely to 60 years, and then many reactors are looking at going out to 80 years as well. So, but just for regulatory purposes, that's the standard amount for a first license is 40 years, and that's what we expect for advanced reactors as well.
Well, great. Feel free to converse with him out there in the Q&A. Thanks a lot for that question. He's a Twitter friend of mine. Benton, as we move to John Michael, when you think about incentives that move things, I remember when we you know, when the Nissan Leaf came out and we had this tax credit in Georgia, state tax credit that you could take in 2 years. So you could lease a Nissan Leaf. It was $269 a month once you baked the federal credit in. And then you got a $208 state tax credit a month. You're talking about an incentive. That's why there were more Nissan Leafs in Atlanta than any other city, because it was just such a rich credit. And credits do have an impact, don't they? Incentives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see a lot more interest. I mean, the way I think about it is, clean energy has just gone on sale, and we are looking at comparing it to other energy sources. Definitely impacts the competitiveness and the attractiveness of making that investment.
Yeah, we'll talk more with Benton in Q&A. So thank you for that great presentation. Hey, let me introduce John Michael. He's coming to us from Orlando. He is a part of the Clean Air Task Force. He's the nuclear policy manager responsible for developing and advocating for policies that promote the development and deployment of advanced nuclear technologies in the U.S. and globally. John Michael joined CATF from the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of International Affairs, where he was a policy fellow. So if you guys if you're young out there and you're on this call and you wonder if these fellowships mean anything and can launch you, it definitely can. He's been working on international climate and clean energy engagement, which included a significant engagement in the nuclear initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial. So prior to his time at DOE, John Michael worked to promote U.S. trade and export competitiveness at the ITA, International Trade Administration, and specifically he helped manage ITA's civil, nuclear, and energy portfolio and completed a project on the export prospects for nuclear-produced hydrogen technologies. John Michael, that's going to generate some questions right there. I know I just came from Savannah, where Kinder Morgan has 10 trains, 10 engines liquefying natural gas, putting them on ships and sending them to our European friends to help them with their lack of Russian gas. John Michael received a master's in international public policy from Johns Hopkins, a master's in environmental management from Yale, and a BS in nuclear engineering from Thomas Edison State University. John, you're a smart guy, and we're really glad to have you today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for the very warm welcome, Commissioner Echols. Very good to be on the panel today. I am going to discuss first the clean hydrogen production tax credit, one of the tax credits that Benton did not mention, but is equally as important for the clean economy and nuclear energy. And then I'll discuss some of the community adders that Benton did refer to for legacy energy communities. So first, this clean hydrogen production tax credit. What is it? Well, for hydrogen production facilities that begin construction by 2032, they will receive an incentive up to $3 per kilogram, of hydrogen produced. Now, that incentive is going to be qualified based on the emissions of the production method, fully clean, zero emissions will receive 100% of that incentive. And the reason that they approached the credit this way was to encourage the production of hydrogen through several different clean methods, essentially to make it technology neutral. So now it will include renewable energy as well as nuclear and fossil fuels equipped with carbon capture. So why is this so important for nuclear? Well, that's because nuclear is potentially an optimal hydrogen production method. And that's for two reasons. First, that nuclear provides clean, firm electricity. And by, I think clean is pretty self-explanatory, but firm, meaning that it provides consistent, reliable electricity. It's dispatchable. You can turn it on and keep it on. And I'll explain why that is important in a moment. And then the other advantage that nuclear has for hydrogen production is that it can provide high heat at the same time as electricity. And what these two things allow are more efficient hydrogen production techniques. Usually hydrogen now is produced via a process called low temperature electrolysis. And with nuclear and these two advantages I mentioned, you can unlock these more efficient techniques called high temperature electrolysis, and there are a few others. So this production tax credit will not only benefit nuclear, because it'll unlock an additional revenue stream in hydrogen, but it will also help to unlock and make more economical another very important clean energy technology in hydrogen, which will be incredibly important for decarbonizing hard to abate sectors like heavy industrial applications and long distance shipping. And now I'll mention well, actually quickly, I'll just mention the Nuclear Hydrogen Initiative that my organization helped to found with some partners. And this is kind of a forum for discussing and advancing these advanced nuclear hydrogen technologies as a critical climate solution. And I encourage anyone to check the website, nuclearhydrogen.org. So next, I will discuss this community adder that Benton referred to. And so again, that provides a 10% bonus tax credit for clean energy projects that are developed in places where either coal mines or that areas that will result in potential losses in the clean energy transition due to having been areas of previous fossil fuel production, especially coal communities. And so this is going to be incredibly important for those types of legacy energy communities, because as we've seen, nuclear energy is becoming increasingly a promising pathway to assist in the just transition of these communities. Just a few days ago, INL, the Idaho National Laboratory, released a report on the feasibility of transitioning some of these communities, switching them from coal to nuclear. And just briefly, I'll summarize some of those findings. So they found that about 80% of retired and operating coal plants have the basic characteristics for switching to nuclear, and that will amount to about from 65 to 265 gigawatts of capacity. So very significant, and that will also reduce the cost by up to 15 to 35% because they can reuse some of the existing equipment on those sites. And my organization is also conducting a study on coal to nuclear with some small modular reactor vendors using characteristics from real and existing sites. And we're also seeing this transition happen already in places like Kemmerer, Wyoming, where TerraPower is doing their demonstration project, and also X Energy in Maryland is seeking a project, when we're seeing these internationally as well. So this community adder is going to be very important, not only for nuclear, but those communities that are transitioning. And I'll hand it over to the next great panelist.
Great. Thank you so much. John Michael, it's hard enough for a guy like me who, English major, nonprofit, PR. I mean, I avoided the science side of the campus, like the plague. It's hard enough being in this energy world, but you start talking about this kilogram measurement thing. Can you dumb that down for me? Can you help me understand, like I know that 6 acres of solar equal a megawatt, right? So put it in a layman's term about measurement for hydrogen. What does it mean?
I mean, that's a little bit of a difficult question to answer, Commissioner. But basically, it means that if you take the weight of all of the hydrogen that's produced, it'll equal about a kilogram, and for each of those kilograms, the producer of the hydrogen will receive a $3 tax credit. So maybe one of the other panelists can answer this, but I'm not sure, the volume that would account for. But I think in the United States for today, this may be helpful. I think we use 2 tons, something like that, of hydrogen annually.
All right, so that's your homework, right? To dumb it down for us out here so we can understand it better. We had at a recent NARUC meeting, we had a Bitcoin mining group come in and talk to us about how long it takes to mine one coin, right? So this guy said 2 hours, we can get a coin. So it helps us, I think, as we're speaking with constituents, to be able to put it in, in a term that, that people understand. So maybe somebody on the call today can put it in the chat if you've got a good little way of explaining it. Well, thank you. We'll have some more questions for you, John Michael. Thank you so much. Well, let me introduce Jackie, our final speaker. She's the Deputy Director for Good Energy Collective, or Good Energy, as they're often called, a progressive research organization making the progressive cause for nuclear energy to contribute toward a climate-constrained, equitable energy future. Say that 10 times. She's a former journalist. So from 2015 to 19, she reported on federal energy and environmental law. I'm assuming you had a Twitter handle and you enjoyed Twitter, and regulations for CQ roll call and morning consult. Afterwards, she led public opinion research and developed policy and communication strategies on nuclear energy and other technologies for the Climate and Energy Program at Third Way, a DC-based think tank. She holds a BA in International Studies and a minor in Linguistics. Hey, maybe that's your job, Jackie. Maybe with your linguistics degree, you can help translate this kilogram thing for us. And she went to American University in DC. She's coming to us from Alexandria, so welcome.
Well, thanks so much, Tim. Such a kind intro. And I was like you, I also avoided the science departments as much as I could while at American. But yeah, thank you to all of you for joining us today on a Friday afternoon. I'm very thankful to NARUC for the invitation to participate in a really timely and important discussion today. It's really imperative that we continue to seek out and uplift women and people of color to provide their perspectives on issues in the energy space. So while I'm really pleased to be here, I just encourage everyone on the call to continue to strive toward achieving diversity of expertise in public fora like this. So Tim went over this a bit. Good Energy Collective, we're working to align the nuclear space with environmental justice and sustainability goals. That means making sure, for example, that we are getting meaningful participation from states and communities in the siting of new reactor projects, a more equitable distribution of the benefits of nuclear energy, that we're cleaning up some of the legacy sites from past uranium mining and milling, and making demonstrable progress on siting nuclear waste in this country. So we also support many kinds of technological and financial investments that can foster a strong domestic advanced nuclear ecosystem. And that includes all of the nuclear provisions that Congress has now enacted in the Inflation Reduction Act. So, Benton did a really great job of talking up, discussing the tax credits, as did John Michael. I just want to add that this is very durable policy. There's not really precedent for rescinding energy tax credits once they're on the books. Occasionally they've lapsed, but they've not been removed. And the concept, at least, of supporting technology inclusive tax credits, if not ones that are based on a specific emissions reduction level, this is a concept that has been on the table for many years in Congress and has support from both Republicans and Democrats. So Good Energy Collective, we're thrilled that these tax credits also carry prevailing wage requirements, so that we're making sure we're valuing the labor of the people who will be building and maintaining new nuclear energy infrastructure. The US Department of Energy releases an annual report with lots of good insights The Energy and Employment Report, the most recent one, noted that the electric power generation sector for nuclear is the most unionized of all energy sources at 20%, and that's great. So I'll spend a little time now talking about another provision of the Inflation Reduction Act that is absolutely critical for de-risking nuclear going forward. And this is support for the development of a domestic supply of high assay, low enriched uranium. Another one to say that 10 times fast for Tim. But Good Energy is very active in supporting and making sure that the advanced reactors in development today will have the fuels that they need to operate effectively. So briefly here, today's light water reactors in operation throughout the country run on low enriched uranium, so that which is enriched to about 5% of uranium-235, which is the most fissile or fissionable uranium isotope that can sustain the reactions necessary to keep a reactor going. But many of the new advanced reactor designs do require a higher blend of this fissile uranium-235, up to about 20%, to enable the kinds of smaller reactor sizes, efficiencies, and longer-lived fuel cores that advanced reactors can support. But right now, the only real purveyor of HALEU internationally is Russia. And for obvious reasons, US vendors in the United States can't rely on obtaining Russian HALEU. China is also able to develop HALEU with its current enrichment capabilities, but there are some obvious challenges there as well. So we need to develop the enrichment capability here in the US for this fuel supply, but fuel enrichers domestically have been hesitant to make the kinds of upfront investments in updating their enrichment infrastructure until they're sure that these advanced reactors are going to come to market. So Congress recognized this problem and in 2020 called on DOE to help address this and support making HALEU available for R&D and commercial use. The thinking is that DOE can either simply financially assist through cost shares the update of uranium enrichment infrastructure, or act as a first buyer and partially offtake that early HALEU, make some of it available to the advanced reactor vendors once their reactors hit the market. So specifically, the IRA puts $700 million toward this fuel availability program, which has received probably about $60 to $100 million in appropriations to date. But this really ramps that up and enables them to get this moving. And DOE is working really aggressively to issue a request for proposals for this work, reflecting the new funding they've now received. They plan to hold an industry day at the Nuclear Energy Institute on this issue on October 14th, and hope to publish prior to that event a notice of intent and scope of work for that program. So like I said, the $700 million is really helping to de-risk an important component of the advanced nuclear ecosystem. But certainly, we won't see all of this come to fruition right away. The Office of Nuclear Energy, like many others at the Energy Department, is a bit capacity constrained. Certainly nuclear in particular, many of their programs and initiatives have, ballooned in number over the last few years as Congress has tasked them with an increasing number of things to do, but their program direction budget hasn't grown commensurately. So DOE is facing this issue head on. They've created the Clean Energy Corps to source new applicants across the board, but it'll take some time. So we'll all be watching this and making sure that they move forward. I'll just briefly speak to another important investment the Act makes in nuclear here, and that's $150 million for infrastructure and nuclear plant projects at our national labs, those that are that fall under the purview of the Office of Nuclear Energy. Folks rightly call the national labs the crown jewels of American R&D infrastructure. This is really true in the nuclear context. They do so much important R&D into nuclear. And ever since the enactment of a nuclear innovation-focused law in 2018, private advanced reactor developers have had many more opportunities to engage with the labs and access their infrastructure and know-how. So it's really important to keep our lab infrastructure up to date and cutting edge. I'll pause there for now. Thanks.
Yeah. Did you, I mean, you've got a good handle on all of this stuff. Did you, as a journalist, I guess, having to write and make sure you got it exactly right, that must have been really good training for you in your current position, huh?
Absolutely right. Yeah, that's a critical component of being a good reporter, getting it right the first time, because, you know, as we know, people make business decisions off of what they read in the press.
Yeah. Well, Caleb chimed in and told us that 1 kilogram of H2 of hydrogen is about 1 gallon of gas in a BTU equivalent. Now, I can deal with that. I can understand that. I remember going to the UK and seeing the Drax power station where they had converted it from coal to biomass using Georgia and Louisiana southern pine wood pellets. And it took 2 tons of biomass to be the equivalent of 1 ton of coal in BTU equivalent. So now we're getting somewhere. And then John Michael, you wanted to add the difference between a ton and a megaton and revise that number you gave us. Give us that quick update on that, about the total statistic that you mentioned.
Sure, that's the danger of citing these things off the top of your head. I think I said a number that was dramatically too low. The correct number is over 11 megatons of hydrogen used in the U.S. per year, and that's about a little over a seventh of what the globe uses. But that amount is expected to multiply, possibly by orders of magnitude, by 2050. And
what's the difference between a ton and a megaton? Just give us the simplicity there.
A megaton is 1 million tons. So we're talking about 11 million tons of hydrogen used per year.
Yeah, so we said 2 tons, but it's 11 megatons. Yeah, just slightly off. So all of us can use some journalistic training, I guess. So Jackie, maybe stay on the line and give us a little seminar. Okay, a question from Kevin from the Michigan PSC staff for regulatory. We answered that question about the tax credit. All right, so let me go to a couple of questions. You folks are welcome to put your questions into that Q&A box, and we'll get right to that. Let me ask you about Jackie or John Michael on this. DOE published a report this week that found that hundreds of retiring coal plant sites could convert. And I know that I've talked with our unions here in Georgia, and they are, I mean, for 2 years we've been talking about that. They want this seamless transition because IBEW has a very strong presence at one of our largest coal plants, and they want it to be seamless. But so, what are some of the other community benefits and challenges involved in the transition? I mean, it's like, what about the safety barrier around the plan, and are you going to have to then go back and do public hearings? And what are some of the other challenges? Jackie, let me start with you, and then John Michael.
Sure. And I just want to say up front here that Good Energy Collective, from where we're coming from, we're just really excited about the prospect of repowering retired and retiring coal plants with nuclear. Coal plant communities are environmental justice communities, and recognizing that they've had these good paying jobs, but they've still borne more than their fair share of dirty air and coal ash contamination. I know that ways to support these communities is something that a lot of state energy offices and the Biden administration are paying a lot of attention to. And nuclear is really unique in having the ability to support these communities in a couple different ways. We released a report just last year on opportunities in this respect, like the DOE's new report from this week, where we looked at the most suitable coal plant sites where they might be throughout the country to repower with nuclear. So to your question, the benefits are many. Similarly to the coal plants that they would be repowering, these are well-paid jobs. You have the opportunity to retrain workers and shore up local tax revenues, while all the while, nuclear plants are providing cleaner air and vastly reduced emissions locally and globally. The DOE report released this week puts the emissions reductions at 99% compared to the coal plant it's replacing. And that only drops to 86% improvement if they include the tally of the projected economic activity that accompanies the nuclear plant. And I'm sure John Michael can speak to some of the technical challenges. I'll just say, certainly some of the biggest challenges as we see them for this kind of seamless coal to nuclear repowering effort, they kind of circle around the timelines. You know, some plants have already retired, their parts are aging or they're not even there anymore, and the workforce is left. So there's less of a clear transition to happen there. And there are also some timeline issues related to when the coal plant closes and what the utility and the state decide to do with the transmission rights on site. So that's still something else to consider.
Yeah, John Michael, you want to add to that?
Sure. First, Jackie made several important points there. First, I'll underline two things that she mentioned regarding the benefits of transitioning to nuclear over coal. And one is the air quality. We know that the air quality in regions and diseases related to respiratory diseases related to air pollution are much higher in the vicinity of coal plants. So that will be a major, health benefit. But also, these coal plants right now bring in hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue for their communities. And that's tax revenue that a lot of these communities, which are often rural communities, don't want to lose. So this is an opportunity to give them some real economic benefit, not only with retaining some of the jobs, but in the tax revenue. So I'll touch on some of the other technical challenges as well quickly. My organization, this report that I cited was a bit high level. It said that 80% of these coal plants would be at a macro level because of certain characteristics like the on-site water sources would be amenable to transitioning to nuclear. My organization is doing a bit more of a in-depth study looking at how the nuclear heat source would match up with some of the existing coal plant equipment, some of the steam turbine equipment, seeing how much could be utilized and whether it's really technologically feasible. And we think that with certain constraints that many of them will be. But again, there are these other considerations to think about that Jackie mentioned, and those will be factored into and need to be factored into many of these decisions at a local level.
Jackie mentioned that that a nuclear power plant has the highest percentage of union workforce. I think she said 20%, and I tell you, this is what I've seen in Georgia with Plant Vogtle, because at one time we had almost 8,000 workers there. 8,000 workers in this little bitty site, relatively speaking, mostly union. It's a very uniting thing in our state. I mean, we have a lot of political infighting going on, but what you don't hear leaders from either political party doing is criticizing that nuclear plant. From the highest to the lowest, there is so much support because the union workforce is super important, to our Democratic candidates, and the economic development piece is so important to our Republican candidates. So it has been one of these kumbaya experiences here in Georgia, and so I imagine it's going to be that way in other places as well. All right, let's bring Benton back into the conversation. Benton, I mean, you mentioned Diablo Canyon, and I think this has been the biggest surprise to me. Is the possible, continuation of this plant, this bill. There was a bill, I guess, in their state house too. Can you kind of give us a little bit of an overview of what's in that bill? Because I haven't actually seen it. I've just heard about it.
Yeah, happy to. And we're really really excited to keep any nuclear plant online in the United States. So always welcome to see that firm carbon-free power remain on the grid, and that workforce be able to keep working. As we've heard with all of the other points made today. But a couple facts just to set everybody on a level playing field when it comes to Diablo Canyon. So they had an agreement originally to shut down by 2025, and so that was set out a number of years ago, and had been the plan. California, looking at their energy mix, looking at kind of where they are with emissions, realized that they really needed some more options, and one of the best options was to extend the life of Diablo Canyon. And so earlier this year we had SB 846, which is the bill number that included this extension. And so that bill specifically said that Diablo Canyon would be allowed to operate for 5 years beyond 2025. Doesn't have any indication about what happens after that or anything. And we don't really like to kind of predict what politics are going to look like or what is going to be right for California in that 2030 timeframe. But for right now, we've got this 5-year extension on Diablo Canyon, and within that bill, there was also 1.4 billion provided in loans to Diablo Canyon for the purposes of upgrading their operations, getting through their new licensing process, and being able to operate for that additional 5 years. Another interesting piece with that, and part of the reason why they could use those loans, and then also why they applied to the Civil Nuclear Credit Program that I mentioned earlier, is their license currently expires in 2024 for Unit 1, 2025 for Unit 2. And so it needs to be relicensed before those expiration dates come up. And so there's obviously a whole process for that. It can be fairly lengthy at the NRC, and there'll be some plant upgrades that need to be made because obviously the operators, had anticipated shutting down in that 2025 timeframe. So there's those two pieces of financial support, both from the federal government that they've applied for at the Civil Nuclear Credit Program. Unsure, how that application is going to actually go, but it's into the DOE, and then also these loans provided through the bill. So with both of those, we're excited for the prospect of continued operations, and look forward to see what comes in the future.
Well, we've reached that point in the call. My favorite part, the lightning round, right? So. Panelists, I'll ask you to keep your answers to 30 seconds. And Patty has given us some great questions. So Patty, thank you. We're going to take Patty's question. I'm going to open it up to all the panelists, but you can only give a short answer. No Yale answers, just short answers. Okay. I'm just teasing you, John Michael. Besides Georgia, Patty says, what states are realistic candidates for new nuclear power plant construction? California is phasing out existing plants, and how long from that concept? Let's not take her second question. What are realistic candidates for new nuclear? If you had to pick 3, 4, 5, start with Benton and then John Michael and Jackie.
Yeah, I'd start with the 3.5, I'd say, that we have now. So we have a demonstration project that's funded partly through the Department of Energy's Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program with TerraPower in Wyoming. X-Energy has a project through that same program in Washington State. And then NuScale is building a reactor in Idaho in partnership with the UAPs. So those are 3 firm projects. And then also just a few months ago, or maybe it was just last month actually, X-Energy announced a partnership with Dow Chemical to build one of their reactors at one of Dow's Gulf Coast facilities. So still awaiting that exact location, which is why I said 3.5.
Time's up. All right, John Michael, would you add? Okay, do you disagree with anything that Benton said, and would you add any state?
I don't disagree with that. Anything Benton said. I would just say any state with an operating coal plant, probably one of the ones on the list from the recent INL study, and one that does not have a new nuclear moratorium.
Jackie, would you add anything that the guys have said?
Sure, of course. Not much to add to those great answers, but I would say, all states have absolutely the potential to host new nuclear, in part because advanced nuclear reactors come in many different flavors and designs. So, the ones in Wyoming and Washington that you mentioned, but also, places like Alaska and Puerto Rico, where they have remote grids, they rely on diesel fuel. There's a real case for microreactors, for example, so that they can have clean energy generation. Most important is going to be making sure the state is interested in nuclear, as well as the local host community, who is in talks with the vendors.
Wow, Vogel's been going on, approved in 2009, and it is just torturous getting to the end, right? Torturous, and you've seen all the difficulties that we have had, but yet we persist. And I am so grateful to our 11 million people in Georgia for trusting us and giving us the benefit of the doubt. I mean, it's been tough. I'm glad we're the first state kind of coming through this, but it's been a challenge. Okay, still on the lightning round. Be careful for that buzzer. All right, T. Naples, I'm not sure how you say that, said, are there any funding mechanisms or tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 specific to SMRs? I'll start with Benton, John Michael, and Jackie, same order.
Yeah, nothing specific for SMRs, but all of those nuclear provisions I mentioned earlier are eligible, SMRs are eligible for. So a lot of eligible money, nothing specific.
John Michael, anything different from your reading?
The only thing I would mention is that no, there is nothing specifically for SMRs, but many SMRs will be able to provide higher temperatures, which is going to be amenable to some hydrogen production techniques. And I will also mention very quickly on Vogel, yes, you have had an arduous process. However, we have seen cost reductions from the first plant to the second plant, and those are traditionally built reactors. Small modular reactors will solve many of those challenges.
John Michael, and before I go to Jackie, John Michael, since an SMR has the safety zone may just be the plant fence, right? So at Vogel, there's sirens way out there, miles away, and they have safety drills or whatever. But will that make a difference for an SMR on an existing coal plant if you're not having to then go out and worry about some kind of safety issues 2 miles out from the plant site? You think?
Most definitely, and we're working with the nuclear regulator to resolve those issues in the licensing process, and SMRs will hopefully have the characteristics that you mentioned.
Yeah. So Jackie, you want to add anything to that?
No, they covered that perfectly.
Okay. All right. Another question here. Patty, thank you, Patty, for engaging. How does the nuclear industry overcome the not in my backyard mentality? So we're going to reverse the order, go with Jackie, John Michael, and Benton. So Jackie, do you feel like there is this, and as we convert coal plants, which obviously there's a lot of incentives to do that. I mean, if there's already a coal plant there and people are used to the smell and the smoke and this and that and the trucks and the trains and the dust, they're already used to that.
Mm-hmm.
Will we have the NIMBY thing happen as much, or is it just going to be scary for people?
No, great question. And on the coal to nuclear issue specifically, we actually have some early data from Potential Energy Coalition, a new polling firm with a guy with a marketing background, and he's found a 5-point premium in support for coal to nuclear transitions in counties with retiring or retired coal plants. So, we anticipate that they will be more supportive potentially and early adopters of advanced reactor technologies, precisely because they know how to operate big energy infrastructure. They know the tax revenues and wage benefits that come with a big energy infrastructure project.
All right, let's go to the Ivy League. John Michael, what do you think?
Well, first I'll say education. We need to educate policymakers, decision makers, especially because they have a lot of influence over what their constituents think. And I think I'll leave it at that.
All right, great job on being short from the Ivy League. I'm impressed. Benton, how about you?
Love the education angle. When we survey communities, we find the most support for nuclear among communities that already have nuclear. I think that education angle is very crucial. And I think really just making sure that those conversations are happening.
All right, Gary asks, why did nobody mention TVA and their commitment to the BWRX 300 SMR project? Gary, I think it's because y'all's football team is having problems. That's my only possible explanation. But let me start with Benton and then John Michael and Jackie. Any comment on the TVA?
As a Texas A&M fan, I'm not going to comment on anyone else's football team after this past weekend. So, but I'll say, it's been a great development. The only reason it hasn't come up is just we were really focused on the policy level discussion here today, but really looking forward to what TVA does with those new plant designs and how that moves forward.
Okay, how about you, John Michael?
Likewise, we're very excited about many of the different advanced reactor, small modular reactor designs on the horizon, including the BWRX D300. But again, it was just the context of the policy discussion.
Jackie?
Iterate the excitement.
Mm-hmm. All right, now we're entering the DC fast charger super lightning round because we've only got a minute left. So just try to pick up this last questions from the anonymous attendee who didn't want to give us their name. So, is there any money in the Inflation Reduction Act to uprate? I guess they meant update existing nuclear plants. Let me just go to Benton on this. Benton, any money in there for updating? I'm not sure what they mean by that, but updating.
Yeah, I think they're talking about increasing the power capacity, doing an uprate increase, and yes, the tax credits are eligible for uprates.
All right, well, y'all, that's all the time that we have. Just want to thank you, Benton, John Michael, Jackie, for having a little fun with me this afternoon, for your time today. And thank you to the DOE Office of Nuclear Energy for supporting our webinar. Some of you may have seen a recent report that NARUC had published on the role of nuclear energy as a keystone clean energy resource. So Kira can send that to you. She'll put a link in the chat if you're interested in seeing that. Also, the Nuclear Energy Partnership is planning a quarterly meeting on October 21st from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to send out an invite if you're on our list. If you're not, send a note to Kira. And then registration is open for our annual meeting and conference in New Orleans. I think that's how they say it down south. New Orleans, Louisiana. And you can find out, you can see the registration link on the NARUC website. Check NARUC's website for information on other upcoming activities, and please reach out to Kira and Catherine at NARUC for any questions. And follow me on Twitter at Tim Echols. I've got to say that. So thank you very much for being on today, and I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Take care.
Thank you.